Welcome to Capacity TV, and today I'm talking to Steve Parrott, who's VP of Product Management at TOMIA. Steve, tell me about TOMIA, where the company came from and what you do.
Well, thank you very much, Alan, for the opportunity to speak today. It's a pleasure to do that. I'd love in the future of the opportunity to connect face to face, and now we'll communicate via the technology of the day here.
We'll be there again at some time, Steve. Yep, sure.
Someday. I'd look forward to it very much. For TOMIA, a little bit of background on TOMIA. We're the combination of three historic software companies: Star Home, Mock, and Telerix. Each of us have been in the telecommunications space for a number of years, focused on a couple of specific areas of the market. In legacy, Star Home was focused on network steering technologies. Mock was one of the leading suppliers of clearing services in the market, and Telerix was involved in the interconnect space, which is the software and services that manage the voice and messaging ecosystem. About 2 years ago, Star Home, Mock, and Telerix combined to form TOMIA, and we have been operating together since that merger as a single entity. We have about 300 operator customers around the world, most of them mobile network operators, MNOs, carriers, CSPs, and we deliver a wide range of services across the roaming, interconnect, and anti-fraud space.
So 3 companies have got together in the telecom space, roaming, clearing, interconnect, so on. You must have been hit quite significantly by COVID, because here we are in July 2021. We've been going through COVID for 18 months, I suppose, if you include the growth in Wuhan originally. How's that affected you?
Well, it had quite an effect, and imagine, for as companies around the world were affected in a number of different ways. On a personal level, thankfully, we were all safe and in a position to be able to go and to be quarantined and remain at home, and for the most part, right, our employees and our customers were safe and sound accordingly. From a business standpoint, there was quite a amount of disruption. So, a couple of areas that were negative, and actually some areas that were surprisingly positive. So in the negative context, of course, one of our key businesses related to roaming services. And as you imagine, once quarantines were being implemented, most subscribers were no longer roaming. They were no longer traveling outside of their home markets. The classic vacation holiday seasons between, the US, the Americans going to Europe, or the Japanese traveling to Australia, that kind of business fundamentally stopped operating during the COVID period and with quarantines in place.
Yeah,
and
I haven't been outside the UK since before the pandemic, and normally I spend a couple of weeks in continental Europe and go to Canada to see relatives, things like that. It just disappeared. Yeah.
It just completely stopped. Absolutely. Yeah. Interestingly, though, we did see that from a roaming standpoint, that there was still a lot of traffic on the network, and it was indicative of a different type of business that we did, and from a positive standpoint, that we were able to basically to uncover and discover, and actually almost take advantage of a scenario where we could create an experiment that would have been impossible in normal days. And this is really the identification of the regional roaming trend, sort of the classic permanent roamer, but most importantly, the rise of IoT. It's very difficult classically to differentiate between the IoT ecosystem and subscriber ecosystem, given the way IoT devices are handled and distributed around the world. When COVID kicks in, quarantines stop, nobody is traveling unless you have a very specific job or responsibility to do that. But we didn't see traffic drop to zero. In fact, in some cases, we saw as much as 25-30% of traffic on operator networks, which was IoT related traffic. And a little bit of digging gives you the indicators that this is not, an expected case. And we consistently saw that growth. Actually, we've seen it in the past, and we saw it throughout 2021, which was interesting. So, our great question from a roaming standpoint, or people roaming, is, what will the future look like? And I think fundamentally it comes down to the exit of quarantines and folks returning to some degree of normalcy as it relates to classic holiday vacation travel. And that is likely to be very regional in nature, specific to operators' own targeted customer base.
Yeah, some mobile operators used to get, people like A1 Telecom Austria used to get a huge amount of their income from people roaming traveling into Vienna and Salzburg and so on. It's Europe, continental Europe's opened up a bit now, but I guess you've got a really good picture of what's happening in different countries, have you?
We really do have a very comprehensive view, because our customer base is a global customer base,
Mm.
and we tend, from our classic customer is the large mobile network operator, or around, a national operator around the world. So being able to see that view, and we can see it from a couple of different perspectives, whether we see it from the clearing business, where you're looking at the interoperator exchange of traffic and ultimately payments, from the steering perspective, where you're placing a subscriber onto the right network, in today's use cases, primarily around cost and quality, or the interconnect world, which is an interesting game, because classically with interconnect, it was the international voice or messaging exchange. And so what we saw in the case of COVID is, at the beginning of COVID, classic voice actually increased in minutes. People were talking more and longer. And it makes it's a little bit of a strange moment, but it makes a lot of sense if you think, during a trying time, folks want to communicate with each other. And so instead of it being a quick mobile call where I would take my device, say, "Hey, Alan, I'm going to meet you at whatever," and then we're done, it suddenly became, "Hey, Alan, what's going on? What are you seeing in this world?" Now, as quarantines were implemented, you could actually see the drop off, where technologies like this, like Zoom and Microsoft Teams and others, were implemented. You could see those services drop. Now we're starting to see the return again, and the normalcy of that voice communication. Since so much of that traffic is mobile originated anyway, it really is a leading indicator of folks like yourself
Yeah.
finally leaving the house a little bit, using your mobile device, calling other places outside of your home markets, outside, and around the world. And while it's very regionalized, it is a good validation of this sort of return as it relates to a post-COVID period.
Right. So what's one of your classic markets was voice and SMS. So that's mainly the SMS side is mainly IoT now, is it? Am I right? Or
Well, so the voice world is the inter-carrier relationship. So
yeah.
TOMIA would provide fundamentally two solutions. One is to
Mm.
enable the business-to-business relationship, and the second is the execution of that relationship on the network. And as quaint and sort of old school, I feel like I'm truly dating myself when we talk about voice sometimes. I do think that sometimes voice is still the killer app. Folks can laugh, right? But at the end of the day, folks, subscribers want to communicate with each other, and it drives a lot of behavior in our ecosystem, in terms of how operators respond and develop new solutions for their subscribers, new plans, new services, et cetera. And frankly, it's also one of the key drivers in the OTT space around why those solutions have become accepted in local markets is that enablement of voice services. So we've seen a bit of a roller coaster. What we would expect is voice to normalize. Fundamentally, we expect it to continue to grow, but we do understand that at an intra-carrier standpoint, margins will be compressed, different, and the challenges that come there as new technologies, new solutions take place. In the messaging world, the big change is actually the rise of true A2P messaging. And the importance of that as it relates to carriers wanting to participate in that space. Classically, there were the aggregator, a carrier would pay a third party to basically send and receive messages. And the P2P messaging was okay, because at the end of the day, you or I there was an offsetting revenue stream, and that was part of the business model. Now with the rise of A2P and the continued growth of A2P, there's a lot of interest in that, in operators, MNOs in particular, participating more and gaining more control of that value chain. And by being able to participate more in that, then they can increase the number of services. And frankly, they can go directly to enterprises themselves. And a lot of operators have been selling to enterprises for years and years and years. So it's a continuation of a trend that they get quite quickly and try to expand upon that. And we see that as the extension in A2P, and we see that as extension to other mobile application environments, where you're now extending it beyond, the mobile app on your device and the communication models associated with that.
I think if you look at my SMS messages on my phone, something like 9 out of 10 are A to P messages. So yeah, you're right, absolutely. A real
Well,
person is
absolutely.
very rare,
Absolutely. And again, that return to normalcy aspect of it,
Yeah.
right? What does that mean? I mean, and how many communication devices do I have? I mean, is there a communication application do I have on my device? I mean, I have, probably a half a dozen at least.
You
But
have
I'll
to
tell
have
you
a
the
sort
one
of
that
directory in your head. Who uses SMS? Who uses WhatsApp? Who uses Facebook Messenger? Who uses
apps
whatever else? Yeah,
absolutely. And
yeah.
then you know what? But the one that people still come back to when it comes to what does my bank use? And
Hmm.
again, right, I'm located in the United States. My bank still uses SMS.
Right.
And so, we see that now there are questions about, what's the future of SMS as it RCS. And
Mm.
again, a trend as operators in the COVID period have taken frankly, had to reassess some of their own go-to-market strategies. There are areas that they've seen an investment, or they want to invest in and grow their business in. And we've seen operators make specific decisions around investing in RCS to ensure that they create that differentiated pricing model in the market so that they can again reclaim some aspects of value. The connections between, as I mentioned earlier, the mobile app enablement, which has traditionally been delivered by third parties, onto the mobile network operators network. And those MNOs saying, hey, how do I participate more? Instead of just enabling it to happen, how do I actually, by selling numbers or destinations effectively, how do I actually enable the network itself so that someone can come on and get the direct connection to the end subscriber?
Yeah.
So there are some exciting things in this space that are happening, and it's interesting to see how we're taking kind of a classic use case and extending that in a number of different directions to create longevity and new business models.
Good. Thanks, Steve. Now, with your helicopter view of the mobile industry around the world, how are you seeing 5G, especially over the last 18 months since the pandemic started? Is it being built out as we were expecting maybe at the beginning of 2020, or is it slowed down, or what?
So, it's a really interesting question. And, anybody who watches this video probably, you could send me a note and we could have a healthy debate about aspects. So I'm going to stick to the broad generalization point that you made right there. So,
Mm.
number one is I think prior to COVID, we were very comfortable with making, frankly, broad generalizations about 5G, its growth in a variety in markets and the trends that we were seeing across proverbially, the Americas, Europe, Asia Pacific. Now, because of COVID and because of the different timelines related to the raising of quarantines and investment cycles for operators and their own business questions, we've had to become a bit more granular in that space or in that decision making. So classically, prior to COVID, I would have said, Asia Pacific is leading the way. Unquestionably, we should take our lessons from what APAC is doing.
Mm.
And now I would argue that it's not that Asia Pacific has fallen behind per se, but there are real moves that go on in like North America that you're seeing in terms of actually bringing 5G to market and monetizing and driving other decisions such as the turning down of 3G networks
Yep.
that are actually happening that were historically would have been more difficult to happen. I think with you see Europe generally not far behind, but a little bit behind in some of that, primarily driven by, again, the quarantine and the disruption that happens. Now, as Europe extricates itself from this COVID period, I think we'll see some normalcy and the confidence. And the key here is that operator executives they want to make a confident decision around this trend. They've seen revenues be impacted. They've seen subscribers be impacted. They want to know before you put X billion dollars into to a network that you actually have a plan to recover that.
Yeah.
And challenges around Asia Pacific, actually we see frankly a delay in the decision making and ultimately, of course, then the networks themselves.
Right.
A lot and honestly, we probably see that delay occurring probably into 2022. I would hope that things would accelerate, but there are real challenges as it relates to exiting this COVID period that need to be resolved. And the countries in many ways that did the best at managing the virus fundamentally are struggling now with the vaccine at its heart. And so that disconnect, that tension is difficult to pull yourself out and do that re-engage in things like holiday travel, roaming services, new revenue streams, et cetera, et cetera.
So yeah, this is leading to, well, one of the things we were going to come on to is blockchain. Is blockchain an area that you're involved in? Because a lot of companies, I guess, in the roaming and in the business of roaming and moving revenue around and things like that, roaming revenue, are looking at blockchain solutions. Are you doing it at TOMIA?
Yeah, we absolutely are. And so to take it back for just one step, so what we see and have high confidence in from a market trend standpoint is we do think that 5G is a game changer. And fundamentally, I don't feel like I'm going out on a limb very far by saying that the use cases of 5G will not just be faster 4G, right? That may be the starting point, but it's difficult to invest billions into new networks if you're just replicating the faster bandwidth model. So fundamentally, 5G is about delivering new use cases. We think there'd be enterprise-centric use cases and leveraging new technologies that 5G delivers, such as network slicing and things like that, to basically bring to market new capabilities that will generate new use cases. Now, from a provider, a company like TOMIA, we see this as a tremendous opportunity for us because it does align with a lot of our core strategies and core technologies, and we work very closely with our MNO customers to be able to deliver that. We think that mobile use cases are inherently roaming related, and with 5G, you want to be able to offer your end subscribers or an enterprise things like private networking solutions. Maybe it's not just about cost and quality, which is what roaming kind of defines itself today, to now it's cost, quality, and experience, or cost, quality, and cost, coverage, and quality, as it might be. So you've got a lot of ways to be able to leverage that, and we think that we'll see a strong momentum into that space. We see strong, significant interest in faster decision making, new offerings coming to market, and the key need to connect the business relationships to the network solutions and vice versa in the most expeditious way possible. The roaming world, classically, and even and mobile offerings have been fairly slow in bringing new solutions to market, new pricing. In the interconnect world, some of those decisions are monthly, even weekly, occasionally with like A2P can even be daily. And so we think that operators have a strong interest in making that change. So all of that is another way of saying that if you just do that and without any other changes, what you're adding is complexity and inefficiency. And so back to your question, you need solutions like blockchain, and you need suppliers like TOMIA to help with bringing re-engaging efficiency and execution in a more complex world. BC, there are a number of different applications that are such as like the billing charging evolution path within the roaming world that is being really driven on like how to settle, bill, and manage, in particular, IoT. If the cost structure is not right and for IoT and the growth of IoT devices is significant, you need to create new ways to be able to encourage and expand that business model. And so, we lean in that space. We lean in blockchain. We've worked with the Global Leadership Forum to help drive that on the interconnect world. And we think that it's ultimately a key action. And we have some POCs going on right now with tier 1 US and European MNOs and groups focusing on how we can actually leverage a technology capability in solving real world problems.
Oh, thanks, Steve. That sounds good. Finally, let's come to the potential for the industry and for TOMIA as, let's hope, we emerge from COVID. We're now talking at the end of July 2021. Things are sort of easing up in some parts of the world, but they're still fairly bad in much of the world, as you mentioned, with vaccinations going very slowly. So what do you think is the potential for TOMIA, particularly over the next 6 months or a year?
So, it's a great question because we're going to be led in many ways by our customers' needs and the trends that we see going on within the market itself. And so a great question is, how do we plug into those macro trends and help ensure that success? So I think we see a couple of areas that are important trends that are worth grabbing a hold of and being an active enabler, and ultimately having with our M&O customers to help them be successful in their strategies. So a couple that just come to mind, right? New monetization models are of interest. So if you're bringing, as I said before, 5G into your network and looking to execute in new use cases, especially in new areas, you do need that solution to be enabled. As I said before, I think the roaming world, which is kind of our classic use case, was historically between cost and coverage. Now, we see the future, it's cost, coverage, and what I characterize as quality. And quality comes down to this idea that I can offer a large global enterprise the same network service, same network experience, wherever that subscriber, that user happens to go. That improves security, experience, et cetera, et cetera. I want to be able to, operators are asking for new monetization. I mentioned A2P and RCS. Now look, RCS has been coming for 10 years, so I'll be the first to admit it. But it is really interesting to see market trends, certainly led by Google and others, to say, we think that the potential of RCS as an enabler for subscriber to business, A2P, application to person communication, is extremely strong and provides differentiated pricing and monetization opportunities. We see operators and MNOs moving to cloud, right? That's probably, I'm sure people will wonder, like, well, of course they are, but many years we've still been putting software on premise or in data centers, but now we're talking about full public cloud deployments, and that's not magic in itself. What is defining about that is it's an entirely new cost structure from which to operate from, to give you that new monetization opportunity. It isn't just about being cheaper, because there's a lot of ways of doing that. It is fundamentally about new entire cost structures for the future. And then I mentioned before about decision making, efficiency, optimization. I mean, big sort of words, but really are necessary for the long-term success of this ecosystem. Operators and MNOs need the ability to execute faster. They need efficiency. They need faster decision making, and they need software and solutions to help them do that. Fundamentally, we believe that business relationship and the network relations are intricately connected. And as we bring new software and solutions, they get more and more complex. Folks want to be able to execute faster, but they also need to be able to execute with confidence and the ability that they can operate their own businesses. And so I think the new technology trends will only bring those concepts closer and closer together, and the need for software and capabilities to enable that to happen. Great.
Steve Parrott, VP of Product Management at TOMIA, thank you very much. Thanks for joining us on Capacity TV today. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. It was a great pleasure. Take care of yourself.
And we'll see each other in the flesh at some time and do this side by side with a camera crew.
Absolutely. Looking forward to it. Yeah.